Picture the view through a periscope. Eye depth is 9 feet. The lens sits about 2 feet above the water, which means the ocean is not below you. It is at your chin. Every swell that rolls past washes the glass green and takes the world away for a second and a half, and then it comes back. And there he is, 800 yards, a small yellow raft, dye marker still bleeding orange into the water around it, and a man sitting in it with one arm up. He is waving at the sky. He cannot see you. From his eye level, 20 inches off the surface, a periscope at 800 yards is nothing at all. Behind him, 4,000 yards back, there is an island. Green, steep, unremarkable. On the ridge are gun positions, and the captain knows where every one of them is because the bearings are written on a slip of paper clipped to the periscope shears. The guns are not firing at the raft. That is what the captain is looking at, not the man. The guns. Because those guns can see that raft, it has been sitting inside their envelope for 20 minutes, and they are not firing. The captain steps back, snaps the handles up, says down scope, and the periscope slides into the well. The submarine does not surface. That scene played out, in one variation or another, across 3 years and dozens of boats in the Pacific. And the reason is one of the coldest calculations the United States Navy ever asked its officers to make. Do not go for the first survivor you see. It was never printed as a single sentence in a single manual. It was assembled the way real doctrine is always assembled, which is out of wreckage. Start with what a submarine actually was, because the films get this wrong. A fleet boat was not an underwater warship. She was a surface warship that could hide. She lived on top of the water, running diesels at 20 knots, because that was the only way to cover the distances the Pacific demanded. Submerged on batteries, she made 2 or 3 knots for about a day before the air went bad and the cells went flat. So the boat lived on the surface and killed from underneath, which means the dive was everything. A well-drilled crew could take a fleet boat from full surface trim to periscope depth in roughly 35 seconds, from the klaxon to the water closing over the bridge. Boats that could do it in 35 seconds came home. Boats that took 50 did not always come home. Now put a patrol plane at 5,000 feet into that picture, doing 180 knots. From your lookout, seeing him to him being on top of you is less than 35 seconds. Time on the surface was not free. It was borrowed, and the interest was paid by the 79 other men below. There is a second thing. A pressure hull resists pressure from outside evenly in every direction. It is not armor. One shell hole through it, above the waterline, somewhere you cannot patch, and she cannot dive. Not for the rest of the patrol. A submarine that cannot dive, in the Western Pacific in 1944, is not a submarine. She is a slow, visible target with nowhere to go. That is what surfacing cost. Now understand what survivors were. Survivors are a map. Look at it from the other side. You are a Japanese escort commander. Your convoy has just lost a freighter. You know a submarine did it, but the ocean is very large and your sonar is poor. What you do have is a debris field. Oil, hatch covers, rafts, men. That field marks the ship's position at the moment of the hit. And the submarine that fired was, at that moment, inside a few thousand yards of it, because that is the working envelope of a Mark 14 torpedo against a moving target. So the survivors are not people to you, they are the center of a circle. You draw the circle and you search it. Which means a submarine surfacing in a debris field is not surfacing in the middle of the ocean. She is surfacing at the 1 square mile on the entire chart that every enemy in the region is already staring at. She has walked to the middle of the stage and turned the lights on. There is an ugly wrinkle. Command actually wanted prisoners because one merchant sailor could hand an interrogator a convoy schedule. So the orders carried a line about recovering survivors, with a qualifier bolted onto it. When practicable. When practicable almost never arrived. So that was the first rule, and it applied to the enemy, and nobody lost sleep over it. The second rule applied to Americans. That one cost. By the autumn of 1943, the Pacific had turned into a bombing campaign, and bombing campaigns produce a particular kind of casualty. Not dead, not captured, floating. A pilot who took flak over Wake or Truk or Palau and got out over the water was, in the best case, going into the sea alive, in a raft, 5 miles off a defended beach and 1,000 miles from the nearest friendly deck. Nobody was coming for him. The carrier could not stop. The flying boats could not reach. But there was usually a submarine out there somewhere. Rear Admiral Charles Pownall put the idea to Admiral Charles Lockwood, who ran the Pacific Submarine Force out of Pearl Harbor. Station boats off the target islands during strikes. Lockwood agreed, even though it pulled his submarines off the job they were built for. It got a name that sounds like something a public affairs officer invented, and probably was. The Submarine Lifeguard League. The first one worked, and it set the price immediately. In early October of 1943, the submarine Skate, under Commander Eugene McKinney, took station off Wake Island during a carrier raid. At dawn on the 6th, while one of her officers was topside helping wounded airmen out of a life raft, Skate was strafed. Lieutenant Junior Grade Willis Maxson was hit. He died aboard the boat 2 days later, and he never met his daughter, who had not been born yet. The next day, Skate closed to within 5,000 yards of that beach, under bombardment, and pulled 2 aviators out. Over the following days, she got 4 more, 6 in total. The first 6 the League ever saved, at the cost of one of her officers. That is the Lifeguard League in one patrol. It worked, and it cost, and it kept costing. By 1944, every strike had lifeguard boats assigned by name and station, and every aviator knew it. Given a choice between nursing a burning airplane back toward the ship and taking your chances in the water, you now had a reason to take the water. And here is what turned a good idea into a trap. The Japanese knew too. They could read the pattern as clearly as anyone. American planes come. American planes get shot down. Within the hour, there is an American submarine sitting off our beach with her periscope up, looking. So the men in the rafts stopped being survivors. They became bait. The gun crews on the ridges above Chichijima and Truk and Palau had rafts inside their range constantly, and they let them sit. Why shoot? A dead man in a raft brings nothing. A live man in a raft brings a submarine. Aircraft learn to orbit high, outside the easy sweep of a periscope, and wait. Patrol craft sat behind headlands with their engines cold. An island garrison learned to hold its breath around a man in a yellow raft. So the rule arrived. Do not surface for the first man you see. Wait. Watch what the island does. If the island does nothing, the island is waiting. If the guns can reach him and they are silent, that silence is aimed at you. What grew around that rule was a set of procedures that read like an insurance policy and worked like one. The boat took a station worked out in advance with the air group, and she stayed submerged, periscope only. The rescue itself did not begin until a friendly fighter arrived overhead and stayed there. That fighter did 2 jobs. It kept enemy aircraft honest, and it told every other American pilot in the sky that the thing surfacing down there was theirs. Air groups were briefed that they were forbidden to bomb or strafe any submarine of any nationality in the strike area. That order existed because American aircraft attacked American submarines repeatedly. 2 of the 52 boats America lost in that war were killed by their own side. One of them, Seawolf, went down with everyone aboard under the guns of an American destroyer escort. So the fighter overhead was not a courtesy. The fighter was permission, and if the fighter was not there, you did not go. It did not matter what the man in the raft was doing. It did not matter how fast the island was pulling him in. You held depth, and you watched, and you wrote the drift in the log, and the men in the conning tower did not look at each other. You should understand what that meant at Chichijima, because Chichijima is where the arithmetic grows teeth. Chichijima is a volcanic island in the Bonins, 700 miles south of Tokyo. It carried radio installations that mattered, so American aircraft went there again and came down there again and again. In September of that year, 9 American airmen got out of their aircraft over that island. 8 were taken by the garrison. All 8 were beaten, tortured, and executed on the orders of Lieutenant General Yoshio Tachibana. 4 were then butchered and eaten by Japanese officers, a fact that only surfaced at the war crimes trials on Guam, where Tachibana was convicted and hanged. The 9th was a 20-year-old lieutenant junior grade named George Bush. On September 2nd, 1944, his Avenger was hit by anti-aircraft fire over the island. He held the run in, put his bombs on the target, took the burning aircraft out over the water, and got out. His two crewmen, William White and John Delaney, did not survive the bailout. Bush came down in the water near the island. And here is the detail everyone leaves out, and it is the whole story. He paddled. He had a small raft and no paddle worth the name, so he used his hands, and he pushed himself away from that island for hours while Japanese boats came out looking for him and American fighters strafed them off. He was sick from the seawater and the concussion. He kept paddling. The submarine Finback took about 3 hours to find him. Her captain, Robert Williams, brought her in submerged, ran her past the raft with the periscope up so the man in it would know something was coming, and only then surfaced. Finback did not go in and take George Bush off that beach. Finback met him where the arithmetic worked, in open water with fighters overhead, far enough from those guns to have a chance of getting back under. If Bush had stayed where he splashed, the raft would have been a lure, and the correct decision by Finback's captain would have been to leave him there. That is the rule. That is precisely what the rule means. Now the other side of the ledger, because there is one. September 12, 1944. The South China Sea. A convoy out of Singapore, bound for Japan. A 3-boat wolf pack was working it. Growler, Celeon, and Pampanito, a group its crews called Ben's Busters. It went beautifully, if you like this sort of thing. Growler killed the frigate Hirado in the dark, and later took the destroyer Shikinami, which is an absurd piece of work, 2 escorts in one action. Celeon, under Eli Reich, put torpedoes into a large transport called Rakuyo Maru. Pampanito, under Paul Summers, sank the transport Kachidoki Maru and a tanker. Textbook, exactly what those boats existed to do. Rakuyo Maru had 1,317 Australian and British prisoners of war aboard. Kachidoki Maru had roughly 900 more. They were survivors of the Burma Railway, being shipped to Japan to work in mines because Japan was running out of men. Nobody told the Americans. There was no Red Cross marking on those hulls. They were transports in a military convoy under naval escort, and they looked exactly like what a submarine was sent out there to sink. Rakuyo Maru did not go down fast. She carried raw rubber and floated most of the day, so the prisoners got out of the holds. The Japanese crew took the lifeboats. When the escorts came back through, they lifted their own people out and left the prisoners in the water. So there were men on rafts, hundreds of them, spread across an oil slick in the middle of the South China Sea. And the submarines saw wreckage, and the submarines did not stop. Before you decide what you think about that, hold 2 things at once. The first is that the rule was, on that morning, correct. The escorts were still fighting. Growler was in a surface gun action. A submarine stopping in daylight in that debris field to load unknown men off rafts is a submarine that loads nobody, because she is on the bottom by evening, and so is everyone she might have carried. The second is that the men on those rafts were Australians and Englishmen, and they were there for 3 days. 3 days in fuel oil. 3 days of drinking seawater and coming apart. 3 days of watching each other let go. On September 15th, Pampanito came back through, patrolling off the Hainan coast on the surface. Her people started seeing wreckage, which was not unusual because they had sunk several ships in that water recently. Then they realized some of the wreckage had people on it. Summers took her closer, expecting Japanese survivors. A voice came across the water in English. Pampanito stopped. She stayed surfaced, in daylight, in open sea, for hours. Her sailors went into the oil with lines. The men they pulled up were so slick with fuel that hands could not hold them, and so weak that many could not grip a rope, and some had to be brought up in bowlines like cargo. Pampanito took 73 of them aboard. She was built for a crew of about 80. Every bunk, every deck plate, every torpedo room filled with dying men, and her pharmacist's mate, Maurice Demers, kept them alive on his own, with no doctor, all the way to Saipan. Summers broke radio silence to call for help, which is another thing you do not do. Celian came back and took 54. Barb and Queenfish came up and took roughly 32 more. About 159 men came out of that water. Some did not survive the run-in. Of the 1,317 prisoners aboard Rakuyo Maru, 1,159 died. The ones who lived are the reason the world learned about the Burma Railway when it did. Their testimony was the first credible first-hand Allied account of what had happened on that line. The rule held for 3 days, and then it broke. And when it broke for something. So what is the honest accounting? The Lifeguard League pulled about 504 American airmen out of the Pacific, across 86 boats and some 3,200 days on station. 504 men who were, by any reasonable measure, already dead. Men who came home and had children, and one of whom became president. Nearly every one of those rescues happened because a captain had the discipline not to go for the first raft, to wait, to make the geometry work first. Now the cost. The United States lost 52 submarines in that war. 375 officers and 3,131 enlisted men went down in them and are still down there. Of the roughly 16,000 who served in that force, about 1 in 5 did not come back, the highest casualty rate of any American service arm in the war. That force was less than 2% of the Navy, and it sank more than half of Japan's merchant marine. Strangling the home islands into a famine, the bombing campaign only finished. Those two facts are the same fact. Those boats did that because they were disciplined to the point of coldness about when they were willing to be seen. The rule was not cruelty. It was not indifference. It was a group of men who had counted the empty bunks and reached a conclusion about what the ocean charges for a good impulse. The rule was correct. And it was still, on certain mornings, the worst thing in the world. Go back to the periscope, 9 feet of eye depth, the lens washing green and clearing. 800 yards, the yellow raft, the arm, and behind him, on that ridge, guns that can reach him and have chosen not to. The captain is not deciding whether that man's life is worth something. He knows exactly what it is worth. That man has a mother who writes him, and a squadron that will fly a missing man formation tomorrow. The captain is deciding something else. He is deciding whether the island is offering him a rescue or a trade. And the terrible part, the part those men carried home and mostly did not talk about, is that from 9 feet of eye depth at 800 yards, those two things look exactly the same. So he waits, he watches the island, and he counts. That was the job. That was always the job, down scope.